Dear friends, this is Deepak Chopra, and it's a great pleasure, honor, privilege for me to have two very forward-thinking, breakthrough-thinking um, colleagues here together. And we're going to talk about something very interesting. We're going to talk about photobiology and the coming food revolution. With me today is Purnacha Machaya, who's the CEO of the Chopra Foundation and great colleague of mine in charge of all the programs that we're doing, among them, looking at the future of uh, food as software, literally as software. And also with me today is Rajneesh Khanna, who's a photobiologist. So before asking Ponacha to join, I'm going to actually ask Rajneesh to give us a little background because he's an entrepreneur, he's a scientist, he's a biologist, but he's also a visionary. And since we've been rethinking humanity on several fronts information, energy, food, matter, and transportation, everything kinds of fits in. So, Rajneesh, take it from here. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up, what your education is, and where you are now with your vision, with your extraordinary vision.
Thank you, Deepak. It's a really an honor and a pleasure to join you on the Zoom and be on the Chopra Well YouTube channel. And about myself, I grew up in Delhi, India. My early education was
Yeah,
in
man, me
oh,
too.
and I went to Delhi University, did a botany at Hindu College there in University of Delhi, and then moved to US for a PhD and did a PhD in Purdue University on plant molecular biology. And after that, I had a great opportunity to work with the leading photobiologists here at UC Berkeley, Professor Peter Quill, and later on also with Professor Winslow Briggs, who has recently passed away. But the just being in amongst these giants, I learned a lot about photobiology and enjoyed my research. And I fell in love with the Bay Area with all the wonderful things that it has to offer. So I decided to stay and join a local company after my postdoctorate work at UC Berkeley. I joined a local company and collaborated on agricultural food products and developing soybean lines and so on. That was for about 5 years. I enjoyed that very much and learned a lot about food. And then I started going back to research at Carnegie Institution at Stanford University and with Professor Winslow Briggs. And just while I was there,
Uh,
I started to think
we
about.
kind of froze a little bit here.
Oh,
We are frozen.
No, we can hear him okay, Deepak.
Hello.
We can hear him. We can hear you, okay?
it's frozen, but we can hear.
We can hear you, Deepak. I think Deepak, yours is frozen, but Rajneesh and me can hear each other.
Maybe Deepak needs to join back.
I think it should be okay. I think it should hopefully come back in.
We can edit.
No, I think we can definitely edit it for sure. But let's see. Okay, maybe we'll just do a quick restart. It's probably easier.
Okay.
It'll be pretty early anyway.
Yes.
Is Class Light right now in production?
No, it's fully functional.
In production. Oh, yeah. So
It's
hey,
available.
Deepak.
Deepak,
We lost you for a bit, but we're back.
We can continue.
Yeah, we can
I think
continue
we're
from
good.
where you were talking about Purdue University.
From Purdue. Okay.
Yeah.
After Purdue University, I had an opportunity to work with photobiologists well known in the field at UC Berkeley, Professor Peter Quayle. I did my postdoc with Professor Peter Quayle, and then um, after that, I joined a company, local company, biotechnology company, and worked on developing soybean lines. And so I learned a lot about food, agriculture, biotechnology, industry itself. And then I moved to another giant in photobiology, Professor Winslow Briggs, who recently passed away at Carnegie Institution for Science at Stanford University. So when I moved to Stanford University or to Carnegie, I started to think about what really I wanted to do. And being in photobiology and food, I wanted to make an impact in food systems and agriculture. So I started a couple of companies, and I've been slowly increasing my efforts there. And then as a photobiologist, I had some thoughts about consciousness and really listening to you, Deepak, and learning a lot from people who talk about consciousness. I started to develop some ideas and thinking about what kinds of experiments we can do, at least from the biological organism side, to start to test some things. So I'll show some of these things briefly.
So right now, our main interest, as you know, is how photobiology can lead to the next food revolution. And I'd like you to speak on that, and then I'd like Punacha to enter the conversation, share some ideas about what we can do together. So share our ideas, your ideas, if you would, on why your research can actually impact how we produce food in the future.
Okay.
You want to share
So
screen? You want to share screen, right?
yes,
Yeah.
Are
I
you
will.
sharing? Okay.
So I will start sharing, and so I'll touch on both quickly before we discuss in detail. So I will talk about some of these ideas about how food technology in food can help. So how we can modernize agriculture and digitization of local food systems, and how we can use remote sensing technologies to monitor our forests as well as crops. And then I'll talk about my research on consciousness, how photobiology can help understand maybe to some extent. So as we've discussed, I'm a molecular photobiologist by training. I work in the agriculture industry as a consultant, and I'm interested in global food systems and resource conservation around the globe. In the past 5 years, I've been working on those topics. I have started two companies, iCulture and Global Food Scholar. Uh, Currently, we have four products, and I'll just briefly tell you about those products. We'll get back to photobiology, which is our main topic. So these products are Phylostat and LoveNod. These are two microbial products, bacteria-based products. ClassLight is a remote sensing technology, and Terralocal is a application. It's an iPhone app, Android app, and it's a marketplace. So the first product is Phylostat. The way iCultivar operates is that it closely works with universities, UC Berkeley, Carnegie, and other universities to see great technologies and help them see application. So Phylostat was developed by Dr. Britt Koskela at UC Berkeley and her PhD student Elijah Melferber. And it's basically a bacteria that is natural and you spray on leaves. And we've been testing it on the field and the greenhouse. It protects from disease, it increases yield. And I think we are testing this now. I think it also increases the quality, which means nutritional benefit to the consumer. Because it's natural, I think the plants accept it and we only apply it once early and it seems to have a lasting effect on the crops. The second product is LoveNod. Love stands for light oxygen voltage, and nod is nodules. This is Professor Winslow Briggs, who I mentioned recently passed away. My other colleague, Roberto Bogomolni, is also involved in this, and this is a soil microbial product. And we have discovered something about the biology of the bacteria that we can use to activate the bacteria to form nodules and fix nitrogen from the air. So that reduces the use of nitrogen fertilizer. And again, especially for peas and beans, legumes, it can enhance productivity and also quality. And so these products are ready, and we are, hoping to apply them in agriculture and help growers. The third one is ClassLight. This is a software that was developed by Greg Asner, and it utilizes satellite images. Satellites take images every 16 days. So about twice a month, we can have an image, and it uses the spectral information to quantify greenness. And so basically, it's looking at how green the Earth's surface is, and you can go down to about 8 feet. So about a tree's location. So pretty much one dot there can be a tree, and you can zoom in and you can see how a tree is performing in a forest or in agroforestry, or if even if it's crops, land cover. So it's a really powerful technology to monitor the health of crops and forests and how they're changing over time. It's been around for 10 years. It was available through funding that ended. So we have taken over working with Greg Asner to make it available. And I'm really interested in efforts, non-profit efforts such as Isha Foundation, Sadhguru, or any other global efforts where agroforestry or forest monitoring or crop monitoring can be used, because you can do this by sitting in your room on a computer. So the last one is Terra Local. It's online marketplace, and it's designed specifically for growers and artisan food producers who don't have an ability to market or be on social media. So anyone can sell their products on this platform to businesses as well as consumers. And we have the pickup and delivery and shipping is all set up within the system. They get their own profile page. It's basically becomes their own app. And so hopefully it connects where food is and where it is needed. And then we are adding education and food donation and food waste solutions, because it's a digital map of where food is and where it is needed. And so we can start to connect. I think we produce enough food on this planet to feed everyone. It's just at the wrong place most of the time. So we can bring it at the right place, hopefully by this digital map, if we can help. So we are developing the iPhone and the Android apps. There should be one version is already published, but we are updating it. So it should be updated in a couple of days. So it's also available to download on iPhone and Android. So that is all to say that I think, we went through the green revolution with all the chemicals and all the other things that improved our productivity, but it also caused some damages. And then we went through the organic farming. I think it's time to think about conscious farming. And I would invite everyone to join us in this effort. And they can reach us through our Twitter and Facebook. Also, they can join our newsletter, and they can email me. My email address is presented over here as well. So talking about doing things consciously, I will now jump into our favorite topic, and that is the hard problem of consciousness. And it is known as the hard problem because, like Deepak, you say always, a conscious being, it's very hard for a conscious being to really understand or know what consciousness is. And I think that is very true. And it may be very hard for us to ever understand. So what I'm going to talk about is just a little tiny bit, looking at this problem from an organism's point of view, and looking at it, how do we interact with consciousness? Because I'm a scientist, and from experience, I believe that consciousness is outside. It's not a manifestation through chemistry in my brain, which is also one school of thought. I don't belong to that. And if consciousness is outside, then I believe that living organisms are interacting with it in some way. So can we start to explore biochemically what those systems are? And that's where I was led after I studied photobiology, because I was studying how our systems interact with light. And it brought me to some very interesting pathways, as I've highlighted here, psychedelics. So I will show you how there seems to be a role of some chemicals, which if we overtake or if we ingest or if we take, it sort of puts our system in super drive and allows us to have those experiences. But our body naturally produces uh, these molecules. And so they are, I think, a part in this pathway. Taking a step back, science and religion have dealt with consciousness in different ways. And I think this is the perfect discussion topic at this age to think about spirituality and science and how consciousness really connects. Our understanding of what science is and what spirituality is. We are doing this consciously, whether we like it or not. So all of these things are happening in our biological system, and we are living in the physical universe, and the physical universe is in space time, as Einstein, I think we've proven him right many times. And then ultimately, where now we are trying to work very hard is marrying the general theory of relativity with the quantum mechanics, which don't seem to talk to each other very well at the moment. But I think we have to remember that it's not just mathematics. And this is one place where I disagree with many of the people, especially in mathematicians and physicists, that the universe is only mathematics. I think if we talk about consciousness, we have to consider biological sciences or sensual sciences, like philosophy and biology. And it's not just cosmology, physics, and mathematics. So I will talk about that how I feel that to understand consciousness, we have to think about biology. And when we think about biology, we have to start with light. Light, as a photobiologist, I think of light as full of information. I'm just showing all the colors that we see around us. And these colors we see because they're being reflected from the objects. So if we a red rose, the red color is being reflected and we are picking it up. And, and on this channel as well, there has been lots of discussion about how what we see what reality is not necessarily how we perceive it, because what we are perceiving is through our senses. So light is an important part of that, and light is a photon and a wave. But more importantly, light carries information. It carries information about the color, what color it is, what direction it's coming from, how long it has been, how intense it is. And plants, for example, can pick all of this information. They can tell what color it is. They know how long it is, so they know when to flower, when to fruit. They modify their growth habits based on how much light or how much lack of light there might be. So all these. Now, if we think about this, light is traversing through the universe. When the one that we are more used to is coming from our sun, but it's having a real impact on living organisms. Light, a photon, doesn't have mass, so it doesn't experience time. But in photosynthesis, it's being converted into mass. The energy of light is being captured through chlorophyll and it's making sugar molecule. Sugar molecule has mass and now it has time. As soon as the molecule is created, it will have an end. But the photon didn't have an end. So if it can happen with light, if there is such a universal energy that can interact with a living organism and cause that effect. So my quest was, can there be something else similar that can also have that effect? And maybe that has some link to consciousness. So that's why I got started on this. And so we will use plants as a example to understand this, because that's my field. And I think plants offer a really good system to explore this. It's difficult to do some experiments with animals and humans. It's a lot easier to work with plants. And they, amazingly, many of the things, chemicals, biochemistry, we share with them. So we can understand things in plants. The whole field of photobiology has been led in plants. We learned so many more things in photobiology in plants, and then we apply them in animals and humans. So keeping that in mind, if you look at plants growing in the dark, we call it etiolated plant. It's just etiolation. Etio is, let's say, an unknown signal, and lation is response to that. And that's the growth in darkness. You can see plants become, they're growing taller. They're trying to find light, and they don't open the top parts because they want to protect their cotyledons or leaves as they're growing through the soil. So they're looking for light. As soon as they find light, they open their leaves, and these are cotyledons or the early leaves. And if there is red light, they will green, and photosynthesis will start, and they will become autonomous, or they will make their own food, and they will be able to just get nutrients from the soil, water, and with sunlight, they can grow, as we know. But if you only give them far red light, this is a little bit farther in the wavelength, there is no greening. They do respond to the light and they become short. As you can see, they're not growing tall. They become short, but they don't open their leaves as much and the leaves don't green. So red and blue light are the wavelengths that we require or plants require uh, for photosynthesis. So what happens between dark and light? So we know this really well, and I am not going to get into too much science. I just want to give a very high level summary of this, that when there is darkness, if a plant has not seen light in its life so far, it's trying to grow through the soil. It's going to grow like this and trying to look for light. And what's happening molecularly at the molecular level in the plant is that there is this one COP1 complex. It's known as constitutively photomorphogenic, COP1, which is basically, if it is missing, the plant will behave differently, which is what we will see. But this complex keeps all the light system, all the genetics of light off. Everything is off. Light activated genes are off. And this allows the plant to grow in the dark. So when this COP1 complex is acting, it keeps all the light active genes off and allows the plant to grow like this. Let's say now we turn the lights on. And as we discussed, lights have many different colors, and plants absorb different colors of light with different photoreceptors. But all this light is turning this system off. And when the light turns this system off, uh, the light active genes are turned on, and then photomorphogenesis, or the response to morphogenic response or growth to light response, occurs, and the plant starts to have leaves and turns green. So this dramatic difference happens when light comes on and it shuts the system off. So I wanted to do a thought experiment. I wanted to see, what if we genetically remove this? This has been done. It's not my work, but it's been shown that if you genetically remove this gene, now you don't have this system that's blocking the light pathway. Fine, that's okay. What if we now also remove the light? So now we don't have light and we don't have anything blocking light. So that means the light active genes should be on all the time. Even when it's dark, these genes should be on, which means that in this system, even in the dark, the plant should look like this. So that's what one would expect. And like I mentioned, this has been known for a while, since 1992, that if we grow plants in the dark, like they look like this, in the light they look like this. But if we take a COP1 mutant, which is missing that gene, it will look like this in the dark and like this in the light. So it's not tall anymore, which means that light itself is not required for growth and development response, right? Light is needed for photosynthesis and survival of the seedling, but you can trigger growth and development in the absence of light. So this sort of gave me encouragement that there must be something else, because signaling is a very important part of development. So we look at light pathways. They are highly conserved. We go back to the first bacteria, prokaryotes. They have very similar photoreceptors that perceive light, and they work through very similar downstream pathways, how light is processed and what the chemical pathways, everything is so highly conserved, which means that, and it's not surprising that the very early cells, they were living in a light and dark environment. So they had to develop these pathways early on in evolution. So then if we continue our thought experiment, which was recently published in the Journal of Plant Biochemistry and Biotechnology. So we do this thought experiment. What I was thinking is, development is happening in the three-dimensional space. There's X, Y, and Z. But then Minkowski, it was a scientist who suggested that space-time, the time is the fourth dimension. So if we are moving in the fourth dimension, like if I start to climb one of these trees behind me, I'm climbing in space-time in X, Y, and Z, but I'm also moving forward in the fourth dimension. And growth is occurring that way. There is no doubt about it. Every small space-time at each moment has certain properties, and it moves on to the next, to the next, to the next moment of time. So if there is a system that's driving that, maybe that may have some link to consciousness because it has having a direct interaction with the living organism. So if we look at this model of Minkowski spacetime, and we just look at all the things that we know about, there is air, oxygen, carbon dioxide. Let's think about plants. They need this. Temperature has to be just right. Water and nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium for plants. And it applies to animals and humans as well. So all the living organisms on the planet are depending on these things. And gravity, of course, is keeping us rooted to the earth. And then light is the only external signal that's coming from the sun. So, as scientists, we have to, as we talk about things, we describe them, we have to give them some names. So I called this hidden signal, that there is a hidden signal. I called it Aleph because Aleph was available. And so I called it Aleph. And the idea of Aleph is that it is a signal that is universal and it's present whether light is there or not, but it allows development or growth and development to occur through the moments of time. So it pushes evolution. It is the driving force for evolutionary process. It's allowing the system to uh, find the best solution for survival. So if we just look at this, looks complex, but it's very, to just to simplify, these are all light, gravity, air, all of them have symbols. So I gave Aleph as its symbol. And we won't get into details of this in this talk. Maybe we can talk about it. I predict that Aleph will share some properties with light, and we can talk about why I think that. But the hidden signal is not measurable. We cannot detect it. But I believe that it is fundamental, or it's important for the growth and development and evolution to occur. So if it is true, if the thought experiment is true, then Aleph maintains growth and development programs through space-time to facilitate organisms' survival, and was an important player in Darwinian theory of evolution. So if this is true, just making a hypothesis like this is interesting. But can I really find a pathway where Aleph or where this signal may be acting? That was my next quest, and I found one. And again, we won't talk about the details of the pathway. It's published in this paper if anyone is interested. But I think that pathway is known as the shikimic acid pathway. It's a very ancient pathway, and it's linked to psychedelics. Again, we can talk more about it in the discussion, but there is a link to psychedelic molecules in this pathway. And currently, our current understanding in biology, in plant development, is that light acts to suppress plant hormone auxin. If auxin is the plant hormone that allows the plant to grow tall, and light suppresses that. So if light is acting to do that, then I think in a circadian system that we live, a hidden signal is acting through a etoreceptor. So I coined the term etoreceptor as opposite to photoreceptor. Then the etoreceptor is allowing the system to work forward. So etoreceptor will drive growth, for example, in this case, for the plant to find light. So it's driving the organism to find the best suitable systems where the plant can grow. And same, I think, is true for animals and humans, because the same pathway, starting from tryptophan, exists in our brains. Serotonin and melatonin are made from tryptophan. So I think tryptophan, how much tryptophan, the percentage of tryptophan that's being directed towards these hormones is one of the places where this sort of signal may act. And so just to finish, there possibly exists a hidden signal, Aleph, and it drives space-time and allows organisms to evolve. And it's a space, just a placeholder, this name. It's a small part of, I think, what the big consciousness is. It's just a name to recognize something that may have an impact on living organisms. And it's perceived by an E2 receptor, and the tryptophan pathway is involved. So I just wanted to leave us with this last thought that I think, consciousness is, I think, much larger. And, I believe that time and consciousness have a tight link with each other. And we are experiencing consciousness in our own way, and we are experiencing time in our own way. How plants experience time, or plants experience these kinds of signals, will be different, and other animals. So it will be different for each organism. But we are all part of this one big information pool that we are tapping into with our antennas.
This is very good, Rajneesh. First of all, thank you for an amazing summary because this is a lot of material that you covered in a short time. And obviously, these beautiful slides helped a lot. So, thank you, Rajneesh, for putting it together, linking photobiology to food production to new ways of manufacturing or creating food. What we would say from the fundamentals up, from ground zero going all the way to matter and even food and biological systems, and ultimately uh, bringing consciousness into the equation. I have a lot to say about these matters, particularly Aleph, your symbolic representation of the conductor of the activity in light and dark. But I'd like Punacha to share his insights based on what you've said, both practical and and the philosophical implications, and then I'll join the discussion.
So Deepak, maybe I'll keep it very quick because I think I really want to listen to what you have to say. But first of all, Rajneesh, thank you for sharing. I love it. But I think from a Chopra Foundation perspective, I think we are really interested in this concept of, we have four pillars, which is physical well-being, mental well-being, community and social well-being, and planetary well-being. And Deepak will probably talk about the planetary biome. So one of our movements is to rewild cities. Like cities have lost their vitality, plants have lost their vitality, and the soil. And I think we have what we're experiencing is that kind of a depletion in the overall value of the soil and the microbiome. So one of the things we'd love to kind of collaborate in how we could take your concept from a rejuvenating soil, which you talked about in one of your initiatives in the eye cultivator, and bring it into this whole concept of rewilding cities from a sustainability perspective. So that's one area. We had this very interesting conversation this morning on rethinking humanity, and I was just listening to that, and I was saying, there's kind of a synchronicity in this conversation. So one of the things is information and insight is key to transformation, right? Today we say this is the fire warning, this is the temperature, this is the UV index, this is the weather, this is the COVID response. Imagine having a dashboard which says this is the greenness in your town, right? Every day, right? Every tree in your city, in my town in San Diego, says this is the green index right now. And by the way, if that green index goes, your level of asthma is going to be impacted. So when I look at the Class Light initiative, I really see that there's a way for us at a global level to change this conversation of behavior, right? Behavior. How do we get care? How do I know that one tree which is growing out there is doing okay? So I think this insight is probably a very interesting conversation to have for us at the foundation level, which then maps into the bigger conversation we were having before this meeting. How does that affect rivers? Like the river Kaveri in my hometown in India provides most water to southern India, right? If the river Kaveri goes dry, Facebook will not be able to answer its calls here because all the call center people are in Bangalore. They won't make it to their work. So you have to worry today if the river Kaveri dries up that your call center support in Google and Facebook and Apple will not work, right? So there's this kind of connectedness, which I think we should explore with using things like what I like about Class Light. And the last one is in Terra Local. I think we were talking about this morning with the team is that the world is moving to a distributed, right? So this ecosystem, it was a centralized, collect all the vegetables, ship it over here to more of the farming. That's what the pandemic has done. Think local, act global. So I think there are some distinct conversations from this whole, what are the governing systems of the future? and how can we take part in this new rethinking economy? So I think that's some of the hike. I think the opening thoughts I had, Deepak and Rajneesh, would love to hear your thoughts on it, and then I would leave it to Deepak to take it from there.
Punacha, thank you. And Rajneesh, we have two cities that will be happy to cooperate,
Collaborate.
collaborate, and take your thought experiments to the next level of practical application for food production. But since you gave such an elegant presentation on the hard problem of consciousness, and since you are also familiar with wisdom traditions, I want to take it one step further with all that you have said and all that Punacha has said. So, during this pandemic, it became obvious, to me anyway, that what we call the biosphere, the ecosystem, is obviously very dynamic and very fluctuates based on human behavior as well. And so, as we return to our cages, where we are all now, you have a virtual background. Uh, Punacha is sitting in his office. I'm here in my home. I look out of the window, and the ecosystem actually has been repairing itself. Birds started to sing. Bees are, I'm told, still responsible for 90. Bees and birds are responsible for 90% of our nutrition on this planet, notwithstanding all the industrial food production. But the bees, the birds came back. Oil production went down because even the price of oil went to less than zero, which means an oil free economy is possible. And I was told that people are breathing better in Bangalore, that people can see Himalayas from 400 miles away. Fish are returning to dead lakes. Even the canals of Venice are seeing fish. So life was celebrating itself as we were locked down, worried about the pandemic, figuring out the vaccine, um, stressed about the financial crisis, and basically going bananas. And ecosystem started to repair itself. So the thought came that maybe it's time now for us to disrupt the physicalist worldview that exists today. And last few issues of Science, New Scientist magazine, this is a very interesting issue on evolution, the changing face of our greatest theory of nature. And this basically questions Darwinian evolution of random mutations and natural selection. It talks about evolution actually including things like evolution's learning power, evolution generates knowledge, the mystery of cooperation, how our environment changes us, how to halt evolutions. Do species even really exist? Horizontal transmission of genetic information, consciousness guiding evolution ultimately. So with this, as we started to look at the biome, we've been very interested in the human microbiome and how the human microbiome is 99% of the genetic information in our body. But then somebody told me, and you confirmed actually in our last conversation, that if you go under the soil, the Amazon rainforest or any rainforest, you look at the soil underneath the rainforest, you have more genetic information and diversity than on the entire surface of all the rainforests. In other words, the gold mine of genetic information is underneath the earth. And it has genetic information for all sentient beings, including plants. Plants are sentient beings. And in my view, notwithstanding what everybody says, bacteria are sentient beings. They are symbolic representations of a species specific mode of knowing. So I look at biological organisms as modes of knowing for consciousness. I'll repeat that. The biological organism is a species specific mode of knowing for consciousness. So this biological organism, the human, Homo sapiens, is actually a window for a particular mode of knowing for pure consciousness, which is infinite, has infinite modes of knowing. But so is a plant, a specific mode of knowing and experience in consciousness. So the plant is an activity of consciousness as that particular mode of knowing. So are other species, owls and bats and insects with hundreds of eyes. All sentient beings are projecting their own universe, so to speak. And somehow our interaction as sentient beings, humans, animals, plants, bacteria, this is the ecosystem of sentience. And the ecosystem of sentience is represented by the entangled biome of the planet. So, if that is true, and if photons are also wavicles, right? Photons are not just particles, they're waves. And they're waves of possibility in mathematical space, in Hilbert space, or whatever. So, what are photons? They are at the cutting edge of what we call consciousness, the field of all possibilities, and matter, because photons are the most elementary particle. And in fact, they're entangled with all other particles and they have no mass, and yet they give rise to sugar, which has mass. So here we are seeing actually the manifestation of what we call matter from what we call nothingness, waves of possibility. Now, if all this is true, that consciousness is fundamental, then the biosphere did not create life. Life created the biosphere. Consciousness and life synonymous, because without consciousness, there's no experience, and we define life as a continuum of experiences in biological organisms. If this is all true, then we can resurrect life on this planet. We can bring back sentience to this planet. We can bring back maximum diversity of life on this planet. We can repair the ecosystem. We can repair the biosphere. We can reverse climate change. And all these mutations that people say are random or toxic environment, etc., is actually an inflamed, entangled biome. And the mutation is a byproduct of that. Then we can address everything. And this leads us to the foundation's main goal right now, which is to create a critical mass of consciousness with people like yourself, with people who have scientific background, but also philosophy, also science, also storytelling, also entertainment, also movies, music. We have maximum diversity of thought leaders, maximum diversity of influencers. We have a shared vision. We complement each other's strengths. We have an open system. We have total transparency and we have feedback. Then we see disruption. We see actually the emergence of a new humanity and possibly a critical mass for a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. But we also totally reinvent a world that is based on the understanding that consciousness is fundamental. Consciousness conceives, governs, constructs, and becomes what we call physical reality. And that is much more doable than changing the world from matter, because matter is a human concept for a species specific mode of human experience. And only humans beings have those concepts. With the bringing together of photobiology, wavicles, particles, as the raw material of the production of physicality on our planet, but actually photons also as messengers of information and consciousness. So, many years ago, this is almost 30 years ago, I befriended a neuroscientist in Netherlands. His name was Herms Romein. He was one of the most amazing neuroscientists of his time, but he was also a biologist. He also understood consciousness. And, in one of his papers, which I'm happy to find and share, actually, Carolyn's listening on this call, there's a paper called Are Photons the Carriers of Consciousness? I'd like to send you that paper for you to review. Photons, the carriers of consciousness. At the very least, we can say photons are carriers of information. You said that, in the spectrum, the colors, etc., different modes of information. But what is information? Information is a derivative of consciousness. to inform. So consciousness informs through information. And in this case, the information is most fundamental. It's photons coming from stars and galaxies and our own sun and moon. So actually, we are looking at the origins of life in consciousness with photons as mediators. And just like everything else, photons are human constructs for modes of human knowing and experience anyway. They're symbols. Similarly, Aleph is a symbol for actually, I think Aleph could be a symbol for the regulator, the conductor of how information gives rise to genetic experience or genetic modulation, and how that then creates the biosphere and the sentience that we see on our planet. So that's a long kind of response to your presentation. I see two very practical things. One is we can work together on the wilding of cities. We have two cities that we already are thinking of. We can resurrect the biome, but we can also refine food production. I was speaking to some Ayurvedic specialists, that we work with. And in Ayurveda, these herbs that we use, like Triphala, Ashwagandha, Shatavari, uh, Brahmi, all of these are adaptogens. They modulate the effects of various pathways on the cell membrane of molecules in our body. They also modulate the effects of stress at a very biological, fundamental level, cellular level. But my Ayurvedic physician friends are saying that there's a concept in Ayurveda called virya. Virya means potency, and the potency of these Ayurvedic herbs is falling, and that's probably because even the Himalayas now are are polluted. So wherever you find these herbs, these Ayurvedic herbs, their potency is going down. If we could resurrect the biome, we could improve the potency of these Ayurvedic herbs, which happen to be immunomodulators, adaptogens, regulators of information and energy in the body, and may have a clue to what Aleph is doing right now with its attempts to regulate the feedback loops in our body. We all have feedback loops, positive, negative, and each feedback loop somehow is correlated with other feedback loops. What is the conductor? Could be Aleph, maybe. So we have spent a lot of time. The article on photons as carriers of information is already on its way to you. It has been emailed. So look at it at your convenience. Punacha, it's been emailed to you as well. And then let's close this with a few comments from Rajneesh. If you want to say anything in addition to after Rajneesh, go ahead, Punacha. But what I'm seeing is a collaboration for both a new revolution in food production, but also resurrection of life on our planet, and actually fixing and repairing the biosphere, which is the expression of genetic information. So, Rajneesh, over to you. Can you give me your last thoughts? And then you mentioned Sadhguru and his organization. We are in contact. I'll be happy to send him this. If he wants to collaborate, he can. If he doesn't, we'll do it anyway. Okay? So,
So,
go ahead.
thank you. And all of those things are absolutely aligned with how I've been thinking about it. And I think thinking of Aleph, starting from that as the sort of the modulator, is really what I had in mind as well. Because behind it, the information is beyond our understanding at the moment, the form of what it is. So it's just a name to think of some way to help the feedback loop to work to our benefit.
Name and
And
form. We gave it Nam Roop, right? So
right,
everything that has a name and form, we made it up. Just like you made up Aleph, we made up electrons, photons, gravity, force fields, money, democracy, latitude, longitude, Greenwich Mean Time. We made it up. So why not make up the universe now
yeah,
from bottom up?
right. And I think it's really a brilliant idea to think of fixing the problems that have been created or have occurred around the planet by going back to the biome. And I think the planetary biome has a lot of potential, and we are just starting to learn the amazing things that we can do, or the bacteria can do, and how we can apply those things to improve things that have been going wrong.
So
So
let me ask you a question. You have scientific data that confirms the fact that this underneath the soil, there's a lot of genetic diversity which we wouldn't find. I mentioned the rainforest and soil under the rainforest having maximum genetic microbial diversity. Is that true?
So normally, this has been published. There are publications, not mine, but they're published. The microbial number of cells in 1 gram of soil are tend to be 10 to the power of 7 to 10 to the power of 9. So 10, what does that make it? Like 10 million to 100 million cells per gram of soil. So the diversity is likely to be quite a bit in 1 gram of soil. Diversity decreases as we go further deeper down. Also, it's impacted the number of cells that can grow, impacted by pH of the soil, many other factors, moisture and things like that. And in our agricultural lands, that's what's been happening. Especially, we've been fumigating our agricultural lands, which to kill all this. And then we try to add more pesticides and fungicides. And so I think going back to utilizing natural systems to rejuvenate our soils is really a great idea. And being able to monitor and show the plants how they're doing. Another thing, many of my own colleagues may not agree with this, but I think we have sacrificed to some extent the quality of our foods, our fruits and vegetables. They're not as nutritious, I think. I guess the science is still out. We are still trying to really establish it, but it's very hard to establish. But we can tell by tasting. If we take a bite out of a peach today, I think it tastes very different from a peach coming out from a really orchard directly from there. So we are sacrificing these things in order to protect our plants from disease by using very strong mechanisms. So if we go back to natural systems using microbes to protect from disease and rebuild our ecosystems, I think we can not only help ourselves but also help the planet. So that's a really wonderful idea, and I'll be more than happy to be a part of it in any way that I can do.
Well, we'll be collaborating with you, and we have a lot of interest from food companies as well. So we'll be getting back to you. Punacha, any last thoughts?
I think just to complement everything you said, Deepak, I think would love to collaborate on the planetary biome. I think there's an opportunity for us to really create a dashboard of what is happening to our biome, right? With everybody now leaving cities and going into states like Florida, what's happening is also tree cover is disappearing, right? So what we can do is really be very conscious about growth. And for the first time, if we can actually take class light and then combine the green map with what is actually happening with the biome, right? If you can do a correlation between greenness and soil, that'd be something from a research perspective. The Chopra Foundation would be very interesting for us to collaborate on. And in addition to everything Deepak's already said about rewilding cities. So look
So,
forward to it.
onward to a great collaboration, great partnership. Today's talk is photobiology and the coming food revolution. A conversation with Rajneesh Khanna and Punacha Machaya and Deepak Chopra. Carolyn, please get everyone's bio and their website, and let's put this out there and let's see who responds to our call for the next revolution in food. Thank you,
Thank
Rajneesh.
you.
Thank you, Punacha.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you, Rajneesh.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Carolyn, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.